Gretchen Whitmer chooses her lieutenant governor running mate just in time for both parties' conventions this weekend. Plus, Michigan's health director going on trial in connection with the Flint water crisis. And speaking of water problems, what are PFAS anyway? We'll explain. Nolan and Stephen are here, and MiWeek is coming up.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. As you can hear, the conversation has already started. I'm Christy McDonald. Kids are getting ready to head back to school. Yes. And the political campaign season is getting ready to go full throttle. And bombshell news out of Washington involving President Trump and payoffs. Here in Michigan, both Michigan Republicans and Democrats are having their conventions this weekend to officially set their tickets. We'll talk about Gretchen Whitmer's new lieutenant governor running mate and how the latest news out of Washington may impact midterm elections. Plus, Michigan's health director stays on the job while heading to trial on involuntary manslaughter charges stemming from the Legionnaires' outbreak in Flint. And getting a better idea of what PFAS are and if it's in your water system. All that is coming up on MiWeek, but let's start with politics and bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of WDET and American Black Journal. Hey guys, there was not a lot of news coming out this week, coming out of Washington, right? I mean,
Until yesterday.
It's one of those things that I was kept flipping around, watching everything, and I had my Twitter feed going as well. And it was really quite a sight to see, but it made me step back and think, okay, is this going to have, or what kind of impact will this have on a Trump presidency, but B, what kind of impact will it have on midterm elections with a lot of Republicans who are running really with President Trump? I'm going to start with you, Nolan.
You know, I think there's been so much of this. It's been a steady stream. I think it's getting harder and harder for the public, for voters to decide what's a real scandal and what's not a real scandal. I mean, this one's a little more, I think this one doesn't play as big out in the, among voters as it does in the media. You know, you looked at the headlines coming out of this, you'd have think Trump had been indicted. It was like, oh, the net tightens. Oh, this threatens and perils his presidency. I'm not so sure. Nothing in the whole Manafort connections or convictions connect to Trump. And on the Michael Cohen plea, you do have the pleading guilty to a campaign finance violation, but that's not cut and dried either, because campaign finance violations are generally civil infractions unless they can prove that he willfully, knowingly violated the law.
Right, but he did say in court that the president or the candidate directed me to pay off to people to hide.
But does that meet the test?
A relationship
that they knew this would violate the law? It depends, and plus we don't even know if it was campaign money that was used. Cohen says it was. We haven't heard from Trump on that issue. There's a whole lot of his word against the president's word involved here. I don't think they have any concrete proof this was campaign money.
But I think what was really interesting, though, is the squeeze is possibly on here. So now if you have Cohen, who's pled guilty, you have Manafort, who was found guilty, and that maybe that there's more impetus on them to possibly give up some more information, if necessary, if they have it, if it's out there.
So as with all things with Trump, follow the tweets. The president tweeting this morning, basically sidling up to Paul Manafort to call him a hero, right, for weathering this and not squealing on him. He's worried because if Manafort talks, if Manafort cooperates, then you have his former campaign manager, you have his personal lawyer, both cooperating with authorities, looking into his activities during the 2016 campaign. There's no scenario under which you're not in peril when those two things are happening. The question is, what is the truth? What actually happened, and what was the president's role? And they'll get to that, I think, pretty quickly, because I think Michael Cohen is going to lead them there. But here's the other thing.
Michael Cohen as if he's a credible witness. This is a guy trying to save his own fanny. And so,
as all witnesses, all government witnesses
they've
are.
had him under a vice, under a squeeze, and this is the best they could come up with. Same with Manafort.
Well,
Manafort's best hope now is a Trump pardon. I doubt he'll be doing anything to jeopardize.
I think that would be a risky thing, too.
Here's the risk that the president has, is that we're getting closer to the idea that he broke the law in the process of becoming the president. And that actually raises a really interesting legal question, right? The impeachment clauses of the Constitution don't speak to whether you can be impeached for things you did before you were president. At the same time, the law generally treats you, if you get something illegally, the punishment for that is that you get stripped of it. I talked to Barb McQuaid this morning about it, and she said, for instance, people who come here illegally, right? If they gain citizenship illegally and it's discovered that they do it, they are stripped of that citizenship as part of the punishment. That's where we're headed with this conversation, and the question is whether the Congress will do that or deal with that. They probably won't. There's also a question of whether Mueller will just indict the president. I don't think he'll do that either.
Let me steer it this way a little bit, though, because we can debate the merits of the case and where it can kind of go from here. But I want to know about the perception of this news and that there's possible peril for the president. What do Republicans do at this point, Nolan, when you're going into now coming out of Labor Day in a couple of weeks, where campaigns for the midterm elections really start up? How do you position yourself as a Republican with this news coming out?
It would have been a bigger problem for Republicans in the primary, I think. Now they've got to move to the middle anyway. They've got to sort of drift a little bit away from Donald Trump. I think they say we've got to watch the process here. At this point, no charges have been leveled against the president. No credible allegations have been leveled against the president. They don't put themselves too far down the line in defending him. But I don't think it's imperative that they run away from him either.
So let's bring it even closer to home and looking at the governor's race. So Bill Schuette, again, who has said, the president endorses me, he's very much the president's guy. Does he look at news like this week and take a step a little bit away, or does he just kind of put his head down?
I think he's in that same place we talked about. His challenge was the same today as it was a week ago. He's got to get to the middle and appeal to independents. He already has the Trump supporters. He's got to go to the independents, and you get to them with local issues. I mean, he's got to contrast his policies and his ideas for continuing Michigan's comeback against Gretchen Whitmer's. That has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Whitmer campaign, who came out and named their lieutenant governor running mate, Garland-Gilchrist, who actually was on the show with us just recently. Go ahead and take a look. Say hello to Garland-Gilchrist. You might know him because he ran a close race for Detroit City Clerk, and he is now the head of the University of Michigan's new Center for Social Media Responsibility. Welcome, Garland. And your name is being floated about as a lieutenant governor candidate, possibly. We might get to that a little later on in the show, as we're always mining for news. Would you be interested in public office again?
I am thankful for the support. I'm humbled to be considered, and I would consider it.
All right, had to get that in there. All right, so that was percolating back in April when I asked him about this possibility, and it came true this week. So, Stephen, give me what your take is on him being Gretchen Whitmer's running mate.
Yeah, I talked to both of them the morning after it happened on the radio show, and they both seem very confident that he helps her in a couple of key ways. One is with Detroit voters who did not choose Gretchen in the primary. They chose the third place finisher. They didn't even choose Abdul El-Sayed. I think that represents a very interesting challenge for the campaign. They think Garland-Gilchrist, who is sort of from the same wing of the party as Shri Thanadar and Abdul El-Sayed, helps firm up those votes. The fact that he's very active in Detroit and in sort of get out the vote efforts in circles, they think is going to make a big difference. They also seem to think that his background in innovation is one of the things that they are going to be able to sell. That this is somebody who is sort of on the cutting edge of social media innovation, voting innovation, all these kind of other things that he's kind of worked on. I would expect that they'll put a lot of that sort of out there as a reason that voters should trust him. I think on the flip side, this is somebody with zero elected office experience, and
even though he ran a close race for clerk, I mean, you still say, but he lost.
He lost,
you know,
and he never had a chance to govern. He's not been in the legislature, which, you know, the LG's position, historically at least, has been the person who goes over and pulls the levers to get the governor's agenda through the legislature. In some ways, it's almost like a whip position. Is Garland-Gilchrist going to be good at that? I don't know, and I don't know that maybe you even cast him in that role if you're Gretchen Whitmer, because you have a lot of legislative experience. So it's a risk in that way, right?
I mean, he does have a legislative job, and he doesn't have any.
Well, he has to be there, right?
Yeah, he doesn't have any experience in that area. I mean, that's not a deal killer. I question how much he's going to be able to turn out the Detroit vote. You know, he's sort of Urkel-ish, and he's not ever. I mean, he grew up in Farmington. He didn't grow up in the city. He hasn't run office here.
So he was born on the same block where I lived as a kid.
Yeah,
so
is it possible that you've gone to school with everybody else?
I mean,
I
he's
went
a
to school with
Detroiter.
it. Yeah.
I mean, his family moved to the suburbs at some point, but he spent most of his life working.
His history's not been in the city until he ran for clerk. He was off the radar screen. I don't know that he's the guy who gets Detroiters up on election morning and gets them out to the polls. I don't know that he has an organization in the city. There were some lawmakers, former lawmakers and others in the city, might have been a better choice in terms of doing a get out the vote drive in the city, which is the only thing she really needs him for in the campaign.
You know, I think it's really interesting because we had the discussion about Bill Schuette's running mate, Lisa Lyons, last week, and you know, making the point that she's from the west side of the state, a part of the state that you thought that Bill Schuette would be okay with, and so Gretchen Whitmer has chosen a running mate again that people would say, well, she should be okay in the city of Detroit.
Yeah, no, she's not, and that third place finish. I would push back a little about your description of Garland. I mean, Urkel-ish is a pretty dismissive term. This is a wildly intelligent, highly accomplished intellectual, and we should not be poking fun at that.
That's absolutely
an
true,
African American in the city,
necessarily
and that does play in the city.
A attractive politician.
I think that I think that plays pretty well in
how much he's played in political circles.
So if you think of how close he came to defeating one of the most popular elected officials in the city of Detroit. I mean, he did not do it, but coming as close as he did to Janice shows that he appeals to a lot of people who are, every-time voters in the city. The question is whether he can get to the voters who don't turn out all the time, people who turned out for like Abdul and Shri in that sort of record-setting election. Are they going to move over?
He's not going to have
but his
$7 million to turn them out the way Shri
But his
did.
politics align very nicely with both Abdul and Shri, and so I don't know that he's going to have all that much time closing the deal with them.
And he's Duggan's guy, you got to assume.
And he's Duggan's guy. That'll help.
Let me ask this: what's going to go on this weekend at these conventions? Anything different, or anything that we're going to see, or will be whispered about?
There'll be a lot of cheering and stuff. You got to look at on the Republican side. There's still some resentment of Beth Clement, the Supreme Court justice, who didn't follow her instructions in killing that ballot proposal, and some folks got mad and wanted to deny her the nomination. She's going to get the nomination. The question is how much animosity she's going to face, whether she'll get financial support. That's the only drama I see at the Republican convention. Democratic, they pretty much settled everything back in the spring.
I feel like they wanted to get their act together a little earlier this time, not have a big fight at the convention over Secretary of State and Attorney General.
That's all set.
Yeah.
That's all done. So, I mean, unless something surprising happens.
I do think that there is going to be a lot of whispering about Donald Trump, though. I know you said you made the point that it's going to be more about centrist views and trying to get independent voters to come over to the Republican side come the fall. But I do think, though, that there's still going to be a referendum on Trump in this election, and there is going to be some conversation about how close should we be standing with him and if we should start to distance ourselves away a little
Or maybe, you know, if you look at Michigan, which elected Donald Trump president, maybe you'll have some people saying, we want to move closer toward him to get that same coalition of voters out. I mean, we're looking at it from this point of view.
Right.
But, you know, I would say if you went to Macomb County and talked to voters there, they're not so anxious for their politicians to run away from Trump.
And that is what is on the list of to-do items for us this fall, is to get out and to talk to some voters from a lot of different areas. All right, turning now to Nick Lyon, Michigan's health director. He'll go to trial on involuntary manslaughter charges stemming from the Flint water crisis. He's being accused of not warning the public about an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. The death of 2 men are being blamed for that outbreak, and Lyon has said he knew about Legionnaire's cases being reported a full year before the outbreak was announced. Governor Snyder says Lyon will stay on the job through the trial. Let me start with you, Stephen. Do you think he should be staying on the job through the trial?
No, nobody gets to do that. I mean, this is a very serious charge. It is a criminal charge. He would serve quite a bit of time in prison if he's convicted. That alone should be enough for the governor to say, let's wait to see how this turns out, and you go do something else in the meantime. Not to mention just the distraction from his job, which was part of the problem anyway, right? He probably was distracted from the importance of notifying people about this Legionnaire's outbreak. I mean, I have had my reservations about the criminal element of this investigation and the way that the Attorney General has done this. There are things I think probably should not have happened, and we could debate the merits all day of whether you'd pick one person like Nick Lyons and sort of put it all in his lap. But that's now for the jury to decide, and as long as that's true, he should not be running the health department of the state.
I think it's really interesting too, Nolan, that we had an 8-month preliminary exam,
Yeah,
which
it's
is a really long process, and it can only make you wonder how long this trial is going to be, or do we pretty much see how this is going to shape up in the arguments?
You know, the governor's keeping him on board because he's mad as hell that he was ever prosecuted, and he's taken this very personal. I think in a normal situation, that's exactly what he'd do. He'd say, step aside, we might even suspend you with pay or remove you from your job with pay. But this is very personal to him. He feels like he's being tried by proxy here. It's going to be a very complicated trial for one reason, I think, is because you look at the charge against Nick Lyon, he failed to warn people about the danger of the water in terms of the Legionnaire's disease, but no connection has yet been drawn in court between the Legionnaire's disease and that water. It's a speculative connection at this point, but they have not established conclusively that the water caused the Legionnaire's disease, and in that case, how do you convict Nick Lyon of manslaughter?
The thing that points to the water is the rarity of Legionnaire's more generally.
This was
a spike in cases up to 90 cases.
But that has not been established.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to have a hard time.
They haven't
The
yet.
science won't be difficult to sort of connect here.
They've had 8 months and they didn't do it.
His best hope is that a jury feels that it's unfair to single him out among
one person
right.
out of an entire
The facts here
establishment.
are not on his side.
All right. Well, go ahead, Nolan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think again, if Rick Snyder's still in office when that trial goes forward and a conviction comes down, he won't serve a day in jail. Rick Snyder will not let him go to jail. He'll pardon him.
Yeah, that would be really dangerous for the Republican side of the ticket if that happened before the election.
Well, it won't happen before the election.
I was just going to say this: if it was an 8-month preliminary exam, you're going to be looking at a much longer trial. All right, now taking a look at the water crisis happening on the west side of the state in northern Kalamazoo County, which has us all asking, could our water be affected by PFAS as well? There are a lot of questions about what it is, what are acceptable levels, and what the state is going to do about it. Great Lakes Now editor Mary Ellen Geist has a PFAS 101 for us. Take a look.
PFAS, They're in you. They're in me. They're even in polar bears in the Arctic. You can find PFAS in pizza boxes, Gore-Tex, Teflon pans, cosmetics, fire retardants, and cleaning products. You can find them in the workplace. They're in your food. They're in your drinking water. They call PFAS the forever chemicals because once they're in your body, they never leave. But what are they? Well, they're complicated. They're part of a group of human-made chemicals referred to as emerging contaminants. So what can PFAS do to you? Well, scientists say high levels of the chemicals have been linked to kidney and testicular cancer, high cholesterol levels, thyroid and colon problems, and fertility problems. PFAS has been around for 70 years. DuPont created Teflon, then 3M invented Scotchgard. Now PFAS is in everything from drinking water to food and particles in the air. A couple of cases of PFAS contamination hit West Virginia. 2 decades ago, PFAS were connected to the deaths of 100 cows and the contamination of drinking water in Parkersburg. On the other side of the state, firefighting foam used by the National Guard led to the contamination of the drinking water in Martinsburg. In West Michigan, in 2017, a shoe company's use of Scotchgard has been blamed for polluting the city of Rockford's water supply. Some of the wells had PFAS levels nearly 600 times more toxic than what the Environmental Protection Agency said was safe. This led Michigan Governor Rick Snyder to create a PFAS task force to look at water supplies all across the state. Now that's more than 1,300 water systems in 460 school districts. All this has led to the discovery of more high levels of PFAS. And now there's a state of emergency in 2 townships near Kalamazoo and a preschool in Ionia near Grand Rapids. The governor issued a do not drink the water emergency and opened up emergency centers to hand out bottled water. High PFAS levels are now reported in Lake St. Clair near Detroit, where Selfridge Air Force Base is the source. There's also a do not eat fish advisory for 3 counties near Detroit after PFAS was discovered in the Huron River. The Michigan Department of Environmental Quality says there are at least 35 confirmed PFAS contamination sites in Michigan, with possibly 11,000 more, and this could be just the beginning of what's happening all over the U.S. So what now? Well, PFAS doesn't fall under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. Environmentalists say the EPA needs to step in to take some sort of action. One thing is sure, right now, the drinking water supply for 9 million Michigan residents and maybe millions of people all across the world is at risk from PFAS contamination. I'm Mary Ellen Geist, Bureau Chief at Detroit Public Television's Great Lakes Bureau, greatlakesnow.org.
And we will be doing some in-depth reporting on PFAS in the west side of the state coming up in a few weeks. In the meantime, you can always go to greatlakesnow.org for all of our coverage on the Great Lakes and environmental issues facing Michigan. You know, when I asked Nolan and Stephen, what are some story ideas? What are some things that we can talk about? For the last couple of weeks, they're like, we need to talk about the scooters in Detroit. And so I've given you 45 seconds for your rant on the scooters. And we're not talking about the Mogo bikes, which are great. We're talking about the scooters.
People need helmets. That's all. My only opinion. I love them.
People don't need helmets to ride a motorcycle.
You need a helmet on that.
Pedestrians need helmets because you're going to get knocked all over the street. You're going to break a hip, and then boom, you're done.
The first.
Nolan, would you like kids to get off your lawn as well? I mean, is that something that?
First scooter light rail collision is going to be one of the ugliest things that we've ever seen. It's dangerous without protection. Put a helmet on.
Oh my gosh! Well. All right, Dad.
Speaking of Urkel.
Speaking of...
now I'm Urkel as well as Garland. Great.
Yeah, and that was a questionable 80s reference, Nolan. We'll have to dive into that. We'll have to have Garland on so he can respond. To that. And that's going to do it for My Week. Thanks so much for joining us. Next week, we'll head to the Detroit riverfront for a special show on the road. And remember, our new show, One Detroit, is coming September 13th. More on that at MiWeek.org. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time. Take care.